The day was September 13th, 2022, when Studio Trigger released a collaboration work with CD Projekt Red called Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Was I hyped? No, I mean, if the inspiration for the show was as much of a train wreck as it was, there isn't much you would expect anyways. Me, being the sensible human being that I am, decided to put it aside. Then the internet happened.
This show goes so hard, just non-stop, full throttle, nuts to butts. It is breathtaking, just a gorgeous, beautiful show.
I just binge-watched Cyberpunk Edgerunners twice in one day, and I can confirm that it deserves every ounce of hype it's been getting.
Cyberpunk Edgerunners is an example of what happens when you give a team gone mad with creativity the resources to do what they want to do. This is what it's like watching a show where every single person working on a project gives a shit.
They have made not just their best anime yet, but one of the finest pieces of cyberpunk fiction in existence, period.
The praise didn't just stop at reviews, mind you. The anime charted at the top of the Netflix anime scene, placed 68th in the top anime of all time, and has an audience rating so high you would think it was photoshopped. I never really played Cyberpunk before, since all I had heard was bad remarks. I also knew little to nothing about Studio Trigger. It did have some decent titles under its belt, but since I hadn't watched most of them, I couldn't really give my opinion. I was completely neutral when getting into the show, and if it wanted me to like it had to pull my attention. Saying that it pulled my attention is a fucking understatement. The very second I hit play on episode 1, I was met with pure chaos. A head explodes within the first few seconds, followed by an intense soundtrack playing in the background. Gunshots fly everywhere, spewing blood and guts across the screen. We see a guy form a rainbow of after images, and just before his own head gets blasted to smithereens, we figure out it's all a fucking simulation. Great. Next thing we know, our protagonist is on his way to school. Can't get more basic than that, right? A funky alternative rock beat starts playing. There are random homeless guys in front of his house. A guy is held at gunpoint in the middle of the street. People are jacking off in broad daylight. We see a pool of blood at a crime scene. Hold on, this is just a futuristic America. Even within all this chaos, the story fleshes out clearly. We are introduced to this futuristic city where our protagonist David is dirt poor, struggling to pay his bills when going to a prestigious academy where it seems like everyone detests him. His only solitude that we see is his mom, who looks like the only normal person in the entire—
She was stable this morning, but then her vitals began to nosedive really out of nowhere. Worn down as she was, I doubt she'd have lasted much longer.
I fucking knew it! After the death of his mother, David's life seemed to take a turn for the worse, until he finally gets pushed over the edge, pun intended, and decides to implant himself using a Sandevistan that his mother apparently owned. The story at first glance seems simple, because the main priority of the show is not given to David, but instead the setting. The gritty, vibrant, and aesthetic theme that is Night City shines through and immediately sets it apart from most anime today. The plot entirely revolves around its setting, and it's obvious that a lot of meticulous planning was required to bring it to life. Instead of immediately progressing the story from episode 1, the studio takes their time to provide an immersive experience to the viewer. You would think that they wouldn't spend so much time focusing on the setting considering its episode count, but throughout the first half of the show, we see this priority towards the city and the setting, where there are often countless minutes spent deepening the role of the city and its influence on our main cast, which in turn works in their favor as the setting is by far the strongest point in the show. We can't really talk about how great the setting is without bringing up the incredible musical scores along the way. This show has some of the best fucking music I have ever heard in all of anime, and that includes everything that I have ever watched. The combination of multiple different genres never seen by anime before in the aesthetics of the show further enhances the immersive role the series is setting. The number of times I heard a track in an episode and paused the fucking video to go search it up is way more than it should be. Honestly, the blame lies on Studio Trigger itself for producing an absurd amount of tracks for one series. 45 tracks for 10 episodes? Talk about overkill. The main reason I wanted to make a video on the topic in the first place was not purely because it was good. It was because because the show was different. It was something I had never seen done before. The uniqueness shone through every major scene, with the art playing a major role for it. I've already made a video talking about art before, so I would like to think that I'm knowledgeable enough to have a solid opinion on the topic. With that out the way, there is only one word that I could use to describe the art for this show: daring. The second I laid my eyes on the visuals, I was completely taken back by the originality and the freshness of the frames. Each scene showcased so much creativity, you would start to wonder how they had the courage to try something so different. Normally, for such a critically acclaimed game, you would think that the animators would stick with a formula that works and not take a risk which may or may not ruin the adaptation entirely. Yeah, well, Trigger said fuck that and proceeded to make 10 whole episodes of over-engineered, gore-filled, vibrant action scenes with so much going on, you need to rewind just to take everything in. If you can't tell by now, I loved every bit of it. The main theme of the show and the path it took really surprised me, to say the least. The setting aside, Studio Trigger really did not half-ass their characters. Every single character in the show played a purpose and was necessary for the progression of the plot, and without even one of them, the route the story formed would have been completely different. Through and through, we see the story treat its characters as pawns, not hesitant to kill them off whenever necessary. This sort of writing creates constant tension while viewing, as anything is within the realm of possible. The concept of characters as pawns closely relates to the core concept of the show, in my opinion, which is trying to hold on to humanity and not succumb to cyberpsychosis. Once a character becomes an edgerunner, they are literally fighting on the edge of humanity and insanity. The more a character enhances themselves by implants, the closer they get to that edge until they go insane. We see this happen to many important characters, and honestly, it's hard to watch. We see this occur more frequently the more we progress through the anime. Characters fight a constant mental battle between their aspirations and reality. They see symptoms that spell trouble, choose to ignore it in pursuit of their goals, and it comes back to bite them in the worst way imaginable. This series closely reminded me of a movie called I Wanna Eat Your Pancreas, in the sense that we knew in the first few seconds of the movie what was coming towards the end, but we couldn't help but get infested with emotion when the inevitable occurred. The same concept gets portrayed in a different way in Edgerunners, where the characters we grew to love over time slowly breaks down and gives in to the ruthless environment they were put in. You can't help but click on the next episode, knowing very well what lies at the end of it all. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a tragic spectacle of a show where the shackles are let loose on an original idea that gets the well-deserved creativity, budget, and effort to bring to life. From the overall vibe to the tiniest detail, every bit of the show was diligently put together by a group of staff who, despite the odds of success being stacked against them, proved us all wrong with something we had never seen before. Even if the inspiration was as glitchy as it was, it doesn't change the fact that this show gave me a standalone experience that won't be topped anytime soon. Sure, it had a tragic ending that could have been way more fulfilling, but one thing I can say for sure is I didn't regret a single fucking second.
So what do you want?